I'm going to have to let you go, Ben. Your role no longer aligns with our operational focus. That's what Troy Manning said. No warning, no meeting with HR, no buffer from legal. Just those words like he was reading off a script he didn't write. I didn't ask why. I didn't bring up the night I stayed until 3 a.m. fixing the back-end crash that would have killed our contract with Morrison Freight. I didn't mention that I'd trained half the people still on the payroll. I didn't even tell him my daughter Sophie was starting her senior year, and we still had 9 years left on the mortgage. Let me back up a bit. My name's Ben Walsh. I'm 44 years old. Been a senior software engineer at Bridgepoint Systems for 17 years. Started there fresh out of college when they still had cubicles and dial-up modems in the back office. I've seen this company through 4 different CEOs, survive the Y2K panic when everyone thought the world would end, made it through the dot-com crash when half our clients disappeared overnight, and rebuilt our entire security infrastructure after 9/11 when paranoia became a business requirement. Here's what you need to know about those 17 years. I wasn't just another code monkey. I was part of the team that kept Morrison Bank's ATMs running during Y2K while everyone else was panicking about the Millennium Bug. I designed the disaster recovery system that saved us during the Northeast blackout of 2003. When our biggest client, Hartwell Insurance, got hit by that nasty SQL injection attack in 2009, I was the one who rebuilt their entire data architecture from scratch in 72 hours. Troy Manning was CEO number 5. He came from Deakin Tech 6 months ago with an MBA from Wharton and a team of his own people. Said he was going to modernize our approach, streamline operations, bring fresh thinking. What he really meant was fire anyone who remembered how things used to work and replace them with his buddies from his old company. I just nodded when he delivered the news, stood up and walked out. 17 years, and that's how it ended. No thank you, no handshake, no severance beyond what the law forced them to give. I packed up my desk in less than 10 minutes. The room got quiet like someone had died. Eyes snapped back to screens. Keyboards got real busy. Nobody wanted to catch my look. Rick Palmer was the only one who came over. We'd worked side by side for 8 years, built 3 major systems from scratch, covered for each other through countless late nights and weekend emergencies. Rick had this nervous habit of clicking his pen when he was stressed, and I could hear it from across the room. He leaned in and kept his voice low. Dude, this isn't about performance. Troy's replacing legacy staff with his own guys. All of them from Deakin. I nodded, couldn't speak yet. Rick looked like he wanted to say more, but backed off. Smart move, I wasn't in a talking mood. My hands were shaking and I couldn't tell if it was rage or adrenaline or just the realization that everything I had built here was about to disappear. I took one last look around the open floor. The fake plants that nobody watered anymore. The same motivational posters about innovation and teamwork that had been there since Clinton was president. The little whiteboard by the kitchen where I'd drawn a smiley face every Friday for years, trying to keep morale up during the rough patches. Nobody looked up. I walked out with a half-used coffee card, a framed photo of Sophie from her debate team championship, and that knot in my chest that felt like shame but was something deeper. I sat in my truck in the parking garage, gripping the wheel like it might give me answers. The engine was off, but I wasn't ready to drive home yet. Kate was at the college teaching back-to-back literature courses. Sophie wouldn't be home from school for another hour. The house would be dead quiet, and for some reason that felt worse than if they'd been waiting inside. At 44, getting fired isn't just about hurt pride. It's about numbers that don't lie. 9 years left on a $340,000 mortgage in a neighborhood where the property taxes alone run $8,000 a year. Sophie's senior year, then college applications. She's got her sights set on Northwestern for their journalism program. Tuition there runs $65,000 a year. We've got maybe half of that saved up in her 529 plan. Kate's teaching salary covers groceries and utilities, maybe the car payments if we're careful. My paycheck was everything else. The health insurance for the family runs $1,800 a month. The 401k contributions we'd been maxing out for the past 5 years. The emergency fund we'd been building for 15 years, sitting at about 6 months of expenses if we lived like monks. Let me put this in perspective. In our neighborhood, I'm surrounded by guys who sell medical devices or run regional sales territories. They make good money, but they understand job security is a myth. We've all watched neighbors pack up and move when the economy shifted or companies got acquired. The difference is most of them have portable skills. Sales guys can sell anything. I'm a 44-year-old software engineer in an industry that thinks anyone over 35 is past their prime. I'd missed birthdays, anniversary dinners, weekend trips we planned but never took. Sophie's debate tournaments, her soccer games, parent-teacher conferences. All for what? A 2-sentence conversation and a cardboard box. My phone buzzed. Text from Kate. Hey babe, everything good? Department meeting ran long. I stared at the screen for longer than I should have before typing back. Got fired today. The dots appeared, then stopped. Appeared again, then nothing for a full minute. I knew she was probably sitting in her car in the faculty parking lot, trying to process what this meant for our family. Finally, want me to come home? I wanted to say yes. I wanted her there, even if it was just to sit in the same room and not talk. But I knew what that meant. She'd cancel her evening class, and that was $180 we couldn't afford to lose now. Every dollar mattered until I figured out what came next. No, we need the money. I'm fine. I hit send and regretted the last part immediately. I wasn't fine. I felt like a shell of a man sitting in his own truck, wondering if I'd just wasted nearly 2 decades building something that was never mine to begin with. Inside the house, the silence hit me like a physical weight. No laughter, no footsteps, no clicking of Kate's laptop from her desk in the den where she graded papers and prepped lessons. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my keys dropping into the bowl by the door. I walked straight to the kitchen and fired up the coffee machine. Routine, muscle memory. The smell hit fast, but I already knew I wasn't going to drink it. My stomach was a fist. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank resume document like it had personally insulted me. That little cursor just blinked and blinked, mocking me for even thinking I had something relevant to say. 17 years of experience, and I couldn't figure out how to start the first sentence. How do you summarize keeping a company's infrastructure running while the world changed around you? The phone started buzzing around 4 p.m. Word travels fast in our industry, especially when someone with my reputation suddenly becomes available. Mike Torres from Data Flow, where I'd done some consulting 3 years back when they were migrating to cloud infrastructure. Sarah Kim from TechCore, who'd tried to recruit me twice over the past 5 years. Ben heard about Bridgepoint. Complete garbage move. We're expanding our cloud infrastructure team if you're interested. Base salary around $140,000, full benefits, probably looking at $160,000 with bonuses. Good offers, decent money, especially compared to sitting on unemployment, but not life-changing money. Not the kind that makes you forget about getting stabbed in the back by people you trusted. Not the kind that puts Sophie through Northwestern without debt or pays off the mortgage early or lets Kate finally write that novel she's been talking about for 10 years. That night I didn't eat much. Kate made spaghetti. Sophie talked about her AP history project on the Cold War, and I sat there nodding in the right places while my mind raced through scenarios. Kate knew something was wrong beyond just the job loss. After Sophie went upstairs to study, Kate sat next to me on the couch. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking Troy Manning just made the biggest mistake of his career," I said. "He doesn't know it yet, but he did." She squeezed my hand. "What do you mean?" I looked toward the stairs where Sophie was probably cramming for another test, trying to keep her GPA perfect for college applications. I mean, 17 years in this industry builds more than just technical skills. It builds relationships. And Troy's about to learn what happens when you throw away someone who knows where all the bodies are buried. The email came in at 6:30 the next morning. Subject line, time-sensitive opportunity, Carl Brennan. I almost deleted it on instinct. Thought it was spam or some LinkedIn recruiter with bad timing. But the name stopped me cold. Carl Brennan, CEO of Apex Technologies. The same company we'd been chasing for over 18 months at Bridgepoint. The same contract I'd personally spent 8 months building infrastructure proposals for, working nights and weekends to map out every database schema, every API endpoint, every security protocol they'd need. I opened it. "We understand you're no longer with Bridgepoint. Would like to discuss a time-sensitive contract. Call ASAP Carl Brennan." That was it. No signature, no corporate fluff, just that. I stared at it for a solid minute, trying to figure out how he even knew I was out. I hadn't posted anything on social media. I hadn't told anyone but Kate and Rick. This was either incredible timing or something deeper was going on. Something in his direct tone told me this was personal. I called the number. He picked up on the second ring. "Mr. Walsh, thank you for getting back to me," he said like we were already mid-conversation. "Mr. Brennan," I said slowly. "You don't waste time, do you?" "I don't have any to waste," he replied. "And neither do you, I assume. I'll cut to the chase. I'd like to bring you on for a 90-day private contract. Finish what you started on the infrastructure build. Clean, direct engagement. You work for us. We pay 4 times your previous rate." I almost dropped the phone. 4 times my rate meant $280,000 for 3 months' work. That was mortgage killing, college fund filling, life-changing money. You want me to rebuild what I was doing at Bridgepoint, but do it for you directly? Yes, he said, that work was yours. The authentication layer alone would take most teams 6 months to get right. You had it mapped out in 3 weeks. I want the version you intended, not what some junior project manager cuts corners on to make his PowerPoint look better. I rubbed my face hard. You realize this cuts Bridgepoint out of a $12 million deal? There was a pause just long enough to feel deliberate. I do. And frankly, after working with Troy Manning at Deacon Tech for 2 years, I'd rather burn money than give him another dime. There it was. This wasn't just about the project. You knew Troy before Bridgepoint? Worked under him at Deacon for 18 months. Worst 18 months of my career. The man couldn't architect his way out of a paper bag, but he was great at taking credit for other people's work. Sound familiar? My heart started pounding. You knew I got fired. I did, he said. Your name disappeared from their proposal revisions this week. I don't like last-minute substitutions, so I asked around. Found out Troy cleaned house and brought in his Deacon cronies. Same playbook he ran there. I leaned back in my chair. And you just happened to have a contract ready? Ben, let me tell you something about Troy Manning. 4 years ago, he convinced Deacon's board to partner with my company on a $30 million data center project. 6 months in, he tried to cut me out and bring the work in-house using specs my team had developed. Cost us both companies when I pulled the plug. Deacon lost $18 million in projected revenue. I lost 6 months and a lot of sleep. The pieces were falling into place. So this is payback. This is business, Carl said. I don't play games, Ben. I want the system we discussed, the one you designed, not the watered-down version they'll patch together to save face. The question is, can you deliver it without their resources? I didn't say yes right away. I told him I'd need to review terms. He said they'd send everything within the hour, including a dedicated laptop with secure credentials. After I hung up, I just sat there staring at the wall like I'd been hit in the head. Kate walked in 20 minutes later, still in her robe, coffee mug in hand. You're up early, she said. Everything okay? I nodded slowly. Apex Technologies just offered me a contract. 3 months, 4 times what Bridgepoint was paying me. She nearly dropped her mug. Are you serious? Dead serious. But Kate, this isn't just about the money. This is about Troy Manning's past catching up with him. I told her about Carl's history with Troy, about the Deacon deal that went sideways, about Troy's pattern of burning bridges and taking credit for other people's work. She sat down next to me, processing. So this Carl guy wants you to help him settle an old score? That's part of it. But the bigger part is, I think I can do this. The infrastructure I designed for Bridgepoint, it was solid. I know every component, every integration point, every potential failure mode. With the right team and proper resources, I could build something that makes their original proposal look like amateur hour. Kate was quiet for a moment, then asked the question that mattered most. What does this mean for us? For Sophie's college fund? I did the math out loud. $280,000 for 3 months. After taxes, that's about $190,000. Enough to pay off 6 years of mortgage payments, fill Sophie's college fund completely, and still have money left over for your sabbatical. Her eyes widened. We'd talked about her taking a year off to write her novel, but it had always been a someday dream, not a real possibility. And if it works out, I continued, if I can prove myself on this contract, Carl's the kind of CEO who remembers loyalty. This could be the start of something bigger. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, you gonna take it? I told him I'd think about it, I said. But the second those words came out, I realized I was lying. I already knew the answer. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was a chance to show Troy Manning what happens when you throw away someone who actually knows how to build things. Kate didn't ask again. She knew I'd already made the call. By noon, I had a contract in my inbox and a tracking number for a secured laptop. Overnight delivery, signature required. The contract was clean, straightforward, none of the usual corporate double talk. Carl meant business. But I didn't sign it right away. Instead, I spent the afternoon digging. Not just into the system specs, but into Carl himself, into Apex, into the full history between him and Troy. It took me 3 hours of searching through old industry publications, but I found the whole story. 4 years ago, Apex and Deacon had announced a strategic partnership to build next-generation data centers for financial services companies. Carl's team would handle hardware and infrastructure, Deacon would provide software and integration services. Troy was the project lead for Deacon. 6 months in, according to a detailed write-up in Data Center Quarterly, Deacon suddenly announced they were bringing the entire project in-house. They claimed Apex wasn't meeting technical specifications. Apex countered that Deacon was trying to steal proprietary designs and cut them out of their own project. The partnership collapsed. Lawsuits flew. Deacon lost $18 million in projected revenue when 3 major clients pulled out. Apex lost time and reputation but survived. Troy Manning was quietly reassigned to strategic initiatives at Deacon before landing the CEO job at Bridgepoint 8 months later. Now it all made sense. This wasn't just about the current contract. Carl had been waiting for a chance to show the industry what Troy Manning really was, and I was going to be his weapon. The laptop showed up the next morning. Matte black, military-grade casing, custom build that probably cost more than my first car. Like Carl knew I'd been dying to work on something that didn't lag every time Outlook decided to update itself. I signed the contract and got to work immediately. The authentication protocols alone were beautiful to work with. Clean APIs, proper documentation, security standards that actually made sense. For the first time in years, no one was hovering over me asking for slide decks or metrics I didn't care about. No Slack messages every 30 minutes asking for status updates. No daily stand-ups where people talking about work. Just pure, focused technical work on systems that would actually matter. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I wasn't second-guessing myself or checking for approval from 3 different managers. I was designing the system the way it should have been from the beginning. Clean, scalable, secure enough to make a hacker weep with frustration. That's when my phone lit up. Troy Manning, I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, another call, then a text. Hey Ben, can we talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding. I actually laughed out loud. Kate looked over from the couch where she was grading papers. Troy, she asked. Yeah, I said, now it's a misunderstanding. 2 minutes later, another text. There may have been miscommunication from HR. Let's discuss options. Kate rolled her eyes. Too little, too late. By day 4, I'd finished the initial architecture. The whole system mapped out, every component documented, every integration tested. I sent it off to Apex's CTO for review. 2 hours later, he emailed back one line. This is the blueprint for our next decade. I read it 3 times. That should have been a victory moment, but it hit me harder than I expected because this blueprint had started in my head back at Bridgepoint. I'd sketched the logic during all-nighters and missed family dinners. Now I was finally building it the way it was meant to be built, for someone who understood its value. The sting didn't slow me down. It fueled me. Every line of code I pushed was like another nail in Troy's professional coffin. But he wasn't going down without a fight. Troy kept trying to reach out, voice messages that got progressively more desperate. Ben, let's grab coffee and talk this through like professionals. Then, I think we can work something out that benefits everyone. Finally, this doesn't have to be adversarial. I never called him back. Didn't need to. But Troy was smarter than I'd given him credit for. He started making moves. Rick called me on Thursday afternoon, voice tense. Dude, Troy's trying to poison the well. He called Morrison Freight yesterday, told them you were violating your non-compete by working with Apex. Suggested they might want to reconsider their contract with us. Did it work? Hell no. Jim Morrison laughed at him. Told Troy that you'd personally saved their back end 3 times, and if Bridgepoint had a problem with that, maybe they should have kept you. But Troy wasn't done. He reached out to Dataflow and TechCore, the companies that had offered me positions. Started spreading rumors that I was emotionally unstable after the firing, that I might be a security risk. Classic corporate sabotage. That's when I realized this war needed bigger weapons than just me. The call that changed everything came Friday morning. Walter Hoffman. Walter Hoffman was more than just Bridgepoint's founder. He was a legend in our industry. Started the company in 1987 with $50,000 and a conviction that small businesses needed enterprise-level IT infrastructure. Built it into a $200 million company before retiring 8 months ago, the same week Troy took over. Ben, it's Walter. I sat up straight. Walter, surprised to hear from you. His voice was gravel, older than I remembered, but still carried that authority that had made him one of the most respected CEOs in the region. I saw your Apex presentation specs. Someone forwarded me a copy. He paused. It was clean, precise, exactly what I used to expect from this company. That caught me off guard. Really? Ben, I hired you because you solved problems, because you gave a damn about doing it right. I never thought I'd have to watch this company eat its own. There was a long pause before he spoke again, and I could hear the weight of what he was about to say. Troy's planning more cuts. 22 people this time. Most of them were here before he showed up with his Harvard MBA and his Deacon cronies. These are good people. Families, mortgages, kids in college. Lucas Hayes, Diana Park, Hugo Martinez. People you trained, people who bled for this company. I closed my eyes. Those weren't just names to me. Lucas had worked next to me for 6 years, always drumming his fingers on his desk when he was thinking through a complex problem. Diana was our security lead, the one who always asked the hard questions that nobody wanted to hear, but everyone needed to answer. Hugo could explain the most complex back-end issue in terms your grandmother would understand. When? I asked. Next Friday. He's calling it operational restructuring for competitive advantage. I'm at a board meeting's Thursday to rubber stamp it. Walter, why are you telling me this? Another pause. Because I think he's going to wreck the place. And because I think you're the only one who can do something about it. What do you mean? I mean, those people trust you. They'd follow you if you gave them somewhere to go. I also mean I've got some liquid assets sitting around, and I'd rather invest in people I believe in than watch them get destroyed by someone I don't. The line went quiet. I sat there for a long time after he hung up, staring at the Apex blueprints on my screen. This was the fork in the road. I could take Carl's money, finish the contract, and move on with my life. Or I could turn this into something bigger. I called Kate at the college between her classes. How would you feel about me starting a company? I asked. What kind of company? The kind that hires all the good people Troy's about to fire. The kind that shows this industry what happens when you actually put technical expertise first instead of MBA politics. She was quiet for a moment. How much would something like that cost? Walter's offering to back it. And if we do this right, we wouldn't just be another consulting firm. We'd be the team that clients specifically ask for. The ones who actually deliver instead of just promising. Ben, she said slowly, are you talking about going after Bridgepoint directly? I'm talking about building something better. And if that puts us in competition with Troy Manning, so be it. There was a pause. Then Kate said the words that changed everything. If they're going to take your livelihood, might as well take their crown while you're at it. I didn't waste time after that. Pulled out an old notepad and started making a list. Not just names, but strategic selections. The people who made Bridgepoint actually work, not the ones who just attended meetings. First call was to Lucas Hayes. 15 years in infrastructure, the guy who could troubleshoot a collapsed server blindfolded. When I explained what I was thinking, he was quiet for a long moment. Jesus, Ben, he finally said. I've been waiting for someone to say it. These new guys don't know a router from a toaster. When do we start? Diana Park was next. Our security lead, who Troy had been trying to push out because she wouldn't sign off on his cost-cutting measures that compromised system integrity. You're serious about this? She asked. Building a real company, not just some freelance collective? Dead serious. Full ownership stakes for founding members. Real profit sharing. No corporate politics, just technical excellence. I'm in. But Ben, you need to know something. Troy's been asking a T to monitor email traffic, looking for signs of disloyalty. He's paranoid about exactly this kind of thing happening. That was useful intel. Thanks for the heads up. We'll be careful. Hugo Martinez was the trickiest call. Back-end wizard out of Phoenix, but he had 2 kids and a mortgage. Couldn't afford to take big risks. Hugo, I know this sounds crazy, but hear me out. Walter Hoffman's backing this financially. We're not talking about scraping together freelance work. We're talking about stepping into the market with serious capital and serious clients already lined up. What kind of capital? Enough to match your current salary from day one, with equity upside that could set your kids up for college. He was quiet for 30 seconds. Give me until tomorrow morning. He texted me at 6 a.m. the next day. Let's build something. By the end of the week, I had 8 people committed. Not just committed, excited. These were senior engineers who'd been watching Troy systematically dismantle everything they'd helped build. They wanted to fight back. We registered the LLC on a Tuesday. Ironclad Solutions. I chose that name deliberately. We weren't going to be another consulting firm that promised everything and delivered maybes. We were going to be bulletproof. The incorporation paperwork was more complex than I'd expected. Incorporating in Delaware for tax advantages, setting up the equity structure so everyone had real ownership, establishing the banking relationships, getting the liability insurance. Walter connected me with his attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia, who'd handled dozens of tech startups. The key, Patricia explained, is making sure you're legally bulletproof before you start operating. Troy's going to come after you with everything he's got. Non-competes, trade secret claims, client interference allegations. We need to be ready. Walter's financial backing was more generous than I'd imagined. Not just startup capital, but operating funds for the first year, equipment budgets, even a line of credit for unexpected expenses. Why are you doing this? I asked him during our third meeting. Because I built Bridgepoint from nothing, he said. Started in my garage just like every other tech company cliché. But we built it right. We cared about our clients, we invested in our people, we did work we could be proud of. Troy's turning it into just another consulting mill. I won't let that happen without a fight. Carl's response to the ironclad plan was immediate and enthusiastic. I laid out what we were building, told him we wouldn't just deliver his system. We'd own the intellectual property, license it to Apex, and handle full implementation and support on our terms. I didn't want a vendor, he said. I wanted you. If that comes with a crew of killers, even better. How soon can you be operational? 2 weeks for basic operations. 4 weeks for full team integration. Do it. And Ben, I've got 3 other clients who've been asking about infrastructure overhauls. If you can deliver on this Apex project, I'll make sure they know who to call. But Troy wasn't going to make this easy. He tried to block our incorporation by claiming I was violating trade secrets. His lawyers sent cease and desist letters to Lucas, Diana, and Hugo, threatening lawsuits if they joined a competing enterprise. Patricia handled that problem with surgical precision. She sent back a response that essentially told Troy's lawyers they were embarrassing themselves, and if they wanted to pursue it further, they should be prepared for a countersuit for tortious interference with business relationships. The real breakthrough came when Diana discovered Troy was planning to outsource our biggest client relationships to a third-party firm. Morrison Freight, Hartwell Insurance, Data Tech Industries, companies I'd personally built systems for over the past decade. He was going to cut costs by farming out their support to offshore contractors. That's when I realized we weren't just building a company. We were building a lifeboat for everything Troy was about to destroy. Here's what we're going to do, I told the team during our first official meeting in Walter's conference room. We're not just taking the Apex contract. We're going to systematically offer these clients what Troy can't, actual expertise from the people who built their systems in the first place. Lucas looked up from drumming his fingers on the table. You're talking about taking Bridgepoint's entire client base. I'm talking about giving those clients a choice. Stay with a company that's about to outsource their support to people who've never seen their infrastructure, or move to the team that actually designed it. Diana smiled. Troy's going to lose his mind. Troy's already lost his mind, I said. We're just going to make it official. Apex Technologies' headquarters sat in a glass tower downtown, 34 floors of steel and ambition. I'd been in this building dozens of times over the past 18 months, pitching proposals that Troy Manning had systematically undermined. Today felt different. Today I was walking in as the owner of the solution, not just another vendor begging for scraps. Security badge, elevator to the 28th floor, frosted glass doors with their logo etched across the front. I walked in carrying nothing but a thumb drive in my pocket and 18 months of suppressed anger in my head. The receptionist smiled. Mr. Walsh, they're waiting for you in conference room B. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm good, thanks. My boots echoed down the hallway as I pushed open the door and stopped for half a second. The Apex board was there, 5 people I recognized from previous meetings. Carl Brennan stood near the head of the table with his usual cup of coffee. And there, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in the past month, sat Troy Manning. He looked up when I walked in, eyes bloodshot, tie loose, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. He'd lost weight, probably wasn't sleeping much. Ben will walk you through the final architecture, Carl said, like this was just another Tuesday meeting, like he wasn't about to end a man's career. But before I could start, Margaret Thornton, Apex's CTO, leaned forward. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd built systems for 3 Fortune 500 companies before joining Apex. Mr. Walsh, before we begin, I have to ask. This proposal is significantly different from what Bridgepoint presented 6 months ago. Can you walk us through the key changes? Perfect opening. Absolutely. The original Bridgepoint proposal was designed by committee, with multiple compromises that weakened the overall architecture. What you're seeing today is the system as it should have been designed from the beginning. I plugged in the drive and started the presentation, but not with slides. I opened the actual system architecture, live code running on Apex's test servers. Let's start with authentication, I said, pulling up the login interface. The previous proposal used a third-party authentication service that would have cost you $50,000 annually in licensing fees and introduced a potential single point of failure. We built custom OAuth 2 implementation that's both more secure and completely under your control. Margaret nodded, taking notes. Show me the database architecture. Here's where it gets interesting, I said, switching screens. The original proposal had 7 different database schemas that would have required constant synchronization. We consolidated to 3 normalized schemas with built-in redundancy. Query performance is 300% faster than the Bridgepoint proposal, and maintenance overhead is minimal. Troy shifted in his seat. I could see him wanting to object, but he had no technical ground to stand on. He'd never understood the architecture well enough to defend it. Dr. William Hayes, Apex's chief financial officer, raised his hand. What about scalability? Our transaction volume is projected to triple over the next 5 years. Good question, I said, pulling up the load testing results. We stress tested the system at 10 times your current peak load. Response time stayed under 200 milliseconds. The microservices architecture means you can scale individual components as needed instead of rebuilding the entire system. For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through every component. Real-time monitoring dashboards, automated failover systems, security protocols that exceeded federal compliance standards. This wasn't a PowerPoint presentation about what we could do. This was a working system demonstration of what we had done. Margaret was impressed. This is more comprehensive than we expected. Who do you recommend to implement and maintain this? Ironclad Solutions, I said without hesitation. We wrote it, we tested it, we know every line of code. More importantly, we're not going anywhere. This isn't a contract job for us. It's the foundation of our company. Troy finally spoke up, voice strained. Margaret, I think there might be some intellectual property concerns here. Some of this architecture was developed while Mr. Walsh was under contract with Bridgepoint. I'd been waiting for this moment. Mr. Manning, would you like to specify which components you believe belong to Bridgepoint? Because I have detailed documentation of every design decision, including timestamps showing most of this work was completed after my employment ended. He couldn't answer because he didn't understand the system well enough to identify which parts came from where. Carl stepped in smoothly. Troy, are you saying Bridgepoint has a superior technical approach they'd like to present? The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Troy just stared at the table, hands folded in his lap like he was trying not to shake. Margaret looked around the room. Unless there are technical objections to this architecture, I'd like to move forward with implementation. No one spoke. Troy didn't even lift his head. Deployment can start within 10 business days, I said. Ironclad handles full implementation, testing, and ongoing support under a 5-year partnership agreement. Apex gets complete operational control and ownership of all custom code. Carl nodded once. Thank you, Ben. I unplugged the drive and slid it back into my pocket. As I turned to leave, I caught Troy's eyes for the last time. He looked like a man watching his professional life collapse in real time. Walking out of that building, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Relief. For the first time in months, I wasn't carrying someone else's limitations. The next morning, Rick called before I'd finished my first cup of coffee. It's over, he said simply. Emergency board meeting yesterday afternoon. Walter's back in as interim CEO. They're calling it a strategic leadership transition. I set down my coffee. What about the layoffs? Canceled. Walter's first decision. He also announced a new partnership with some consulting firm called Ironclad Solutions to support client implementations. By noon, I had 14 emails from Walter's team. Legal paperwork, system access credentials, vendor agreements. Everything formalizing the partnership between Bridgepoint and Ironclad. We weren't just supporting their deployments anymore. We were running the technical side of their business. The team meeting that afternoon was surreal. Lucas, Diana, Hugo, and 5 others sitting around Walter's old conference table, now officially Ironclad employees with equity stakes and decision-making authority. How does it feel to own a piece of the company that's about to transform this industry? I asked. Diana smiled. Feels like we should have done this years ago. Lucas stopped drumming his fingers long enough to say, feels like we're finally building something that matters. But the real validation came 3 weeks later. Morrison Freight called directly. Ben, it's Jim Morrison. I heard about your new company. We've been having issues with the system Bridgepoint set up for us last year. Think Ironclad could take a look? Within 6 months, we had contracts with Morrison Freight, Hartwell Insurance, Data Tech Industries, and 8 new clients Carl had referred. 22 people on payroll, all of them equity owners, all of them working on systems they actually cared about. We didn't have an organizational chart. We had trust. We didn't have corporate meetings about meetings. We had technical reviews where people actually understood what they were reviewing. Clients noticed immediately. Word spread through the industry like wildfire. Ironclad doesn't just promise results became our reputation. They deliver them. 18 months later, I was debugging a complex integration issue when Sophie walked into my home office. She was wearing her Northwestern University sweatshirt, the one we'd bought during the campus visit that was now fully funded. Dad, you missed dinner again, she said, but she was smiling. I looked at the clock. 8:30 p.m. Sorry, kiddo. This client needed, Dad, it's Saturday night. The client can wait until Monday. She was right. I closed the laptop. Besides, she added, Mom made your favorite, and she has news about her book. Kate had finished her novel 6 months earlier, during the sabbatical that ironclad success had made possible. 3 publishers were interested. The advance wouldn't change our lives, but it would change hers. At dinner, Kate told us about the publishing meeting she'd had that afternoon. Sophie talked about her internship application at the Chicago Tribune. I mostly listened, realizing that for the first time in years, our family conversations weren't about what we were sacrificing for my career. They were about what we were building together. The next Saturday, I made it to Sophie's soccer championship game. Not just made it, I was there an hour early, front row of the bleachers. She spotted me during warm-ups and lit up like Christmas morning. Dad, you actually made it! Wouldn't miss it, I called back. She scored twice that afternoon. After the game, she ran over and hugged me like I'd just given her the world. We won state, Dad! Can you believe it? I can believe it, I said. You've been working toward this for 4 years. Walking to the car, Sophie asked, Dad, whatever happened to that Troy guy? The one who fired you. I'd almost forgotten about Troy Manning. Last I'd heard, he was doing freelance consulting for second-tier firms in Austin. Someone told me he'd started a blog about strategic leadership transitions that nobody read. He's not our problem anymore, I told Sophie. He never really was. That night, after Sophie went to bed and Kate was reading manuscript notes in bed, I sat on the back deck with a beer and thought about the past 2 years. The fire pit was glowing, crickets were chirping, and for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't worried about Monday morning. My phone buzzed. Email from a potential client in Seattle, a healthcare startup that needed infrastructure design. The kind of project that would have excited me 2 years ago because it meant job security. Now it excited me because it meant we were building something that mattered. At 46, success isn't about crushing your enemies or proving you're the smartest person in the room. It's about building something sustainable for your family, your team, your industry. It's about showing the next generation that experience and relationships still matter in a world obsessed with disruption and shortcuts. It's about proving that when someone tries to throw you away, you don't have to disappear. You can build your own table, set your own terms, and invite the people who matter to join you. Troy Manning thought he was firing an employee. What he actually did was create a competitor who understood his weaknesses better than he understood his own strengths. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. And in this industry, correction has a way of becoming the new standard.